In early 2022, Sri Lanka's national reserves dropped from over $7 billion to near zero. Within weeks, the island of 22 million people found itself running out of the most basic elements of survival. Fuel shipments stopped, hospitals exhausted their medicine supplies, food shelves went bare. The national shortage pushed civilians to their absolute physical limit. Families spent days standing in mile-long queues with empty plastic canisters, desperate for a few liters of kerosene to cook meals. That desperation finally boiled over into mass revolt. Thousands of citizens breached the presidential palace, physically occupying the halls and forcing the government to flee the country. The interim leadership faced a rigid mathematical reality. To keep the power grid online and prevent mass starvation, Colombo needed a $4 billion cash injection immediately. They sent an urgent distress call to Beijing. What began as a domestic economic collapse instantly became a high-stakes geopolitical test. A nation at the center of the Indian Ocean was bankrupt and exposed, requiring a superpower to step in. Beijing, however, hesitated. Chinese state banks and financial institutions already held a massive portion of Sri Lanka's external debt, built up over years of ambitious infrastructure projects. This satellite image shows the Hambantota port complex. Built with a $1.4 billion loan, the harbor failed to attract traffic, causing a default. To recover cash, Chinese creditors executed an equity swap, securing a 99-year operating lease. Controlling a deep-water port just 400 kilometers off the southern coast of India gave Beijing a strategic foothold along one of the world's most vital maritime arteries. So when the 2022 distress call arrived, Beijing viewed the crisis through the lens of a creditor. Rather than sending immediate relief, Chinese officials demanded a formal debt restructuring process before releasing new funds. Negotiations stalled in committee rooms. Beijing offered minor aid, around $75 million and some rice, but withheld the massive macroeconomic bailout Sri Lanka actually needed to survive the month. By treating a collapsing nation strictly as a balance sheet problem, China delayed its response, right as a narrow window of geopolitical opportunity opened up. India did not hesitate. Within 9 hours of Sri Lanka's request, New Delhi bypassed its usual bureaucratic channels and approved an initial $1 billion credit line to purchase essential imports. Over the following weeks, that commitment scaled to nearly $4 billion in currency swaps, loan deferments, and lines of credit. India provided this capital without extracting long-term asset leases or imposing complex structural conditions. Indian Navy ships and Air Force transports began arriving at Sri Lankan docks and airfields, unloading thousands of tons of emergency medical supplies, diesel fuel, and staple foods like rice and wheat. This chart shows the sheer disparity in the superpower response. While China's initial emergency aid hovered around $75 million, India flooded the zone with nearly $4 billion of immediate liquidity. The intervention marked the largest single emergency assistance program ever executed by the Indian government for another nation. By activating its Neighborhood First policy with overwhelming speed and unconditional material support, India secured the loyalty of a desperate neighbor and outmaneuvered Beijing's financial planners. That $4 billion lifeline was a calculated strategic maneuver. New Delhi recognized the cost of the bailout was far lower than the cost of a hostile foreign power dominating its southern border. This map shows exactly why the island is so valuable. 60 to 70% of oil shipments from the Middle East and the primary high-volume shipping lanes connecting Europe to Asia passed directly underneath Sri Lanka. India's rapid deployment was designed to prevent a second Hambantota scenario. If Colombo had defaulted completely, Beijing could have leveraged the chaos to secure another 99-year lease on a deep-water port like Colombo or Trincomalee. The billions spent were a geopolitical investment. By keeping Sri Lanka afloat, India locked the island into its strategic orbit, physically securing its maritime flank against further Chinese expansion. The capital injection worked. Sri Lanka's economy stabilized, the massive fuel queues disappeared, and the government secured the breathing room to eventually negotiate an IMF bailout. While the 99-year lease at Hambantota remains active, the crisis effectively blockaded any new predatory loans. The political appetite in Colombo for massive, high-interest Chinese infrastructure projects evaporated. In return, bilateral relations between New Delhi and Colombo hit their highest point in 30 years, with both governments actively collaborating on regional security and energy infrastructure. Conversely, China suffered immense reputational damage across South Asia. They were branded as an aggressive creditor who built massive infrastructure during times of stability but vanished when the bills came due. The crisis proved that in moments of extreme sovereign distress, transactional infrastructure loans failed to buy the geopolitical loyalty that rapid, unconditional emergency lifelines secure. The events of 2022 exposed two starkly contrasting playbooks. China expands its reach by building physical ports and extracting demanding loans. India secures its borders by building alliances and delivering rapid lifelines. As the global economy relies increasingly on the shipping lanes south of Sri Lanka, the question is, which of these strategies will actually win the long-term battle for the Indian Ocean?